Okay, good evening, all. Just going to adjust the lighting. Yeah, it's a bit better. Okay, so we'll just get right into it. It's already 6 o'clock. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. So some time ago, there was a request that I do a series on the stages of insight, and I've decided to do that now. I don't know how many talks this is going to take. We're just going to go through it as we go through it. Basically, what I want to do is talk about the Vipassana meditation according to the Mahasi method, as it's called, which was incidentally my first introduction to Buddhist meditation was the Mahasi method. And I did that pretty much exclusively for the first several years. So I have some background in that practice. And today's talk, I just want to kind of set the stage and talk about things generally. And then what I'm going to do is go through Mahasi Sayadaw's book, The Progress of Insight. So, going back to the first beginnings of this scheme is we can find in the Relay Coach Sutta, Majjhima 24, the Rata Winata Sutta, where Moggallana is in conversation with a monk called Mantani Putta, and they discuss 7 stages of spiritual development. Now, this sutta, the actual Dhamma content in this sutta is very brief and concise, as we often find the case in the sutta. So we don't really have descriptions of these different states. There are 7 purifications, as they're called, beginning with Sila Visuddhi, the purification of morality. Then Chitta Visuddhi, purification of mind. Citta Visuddhi, purification of view. Kanka Vitarana Visuddhi, purification by overcoming of doubt. Magga Jnana Dasana Visuddhi, purification by knowledge and vision of what is path and not path. Patipada Jnana Dasana Visuddhi, purification of knowledge and vision of the course of practice. And finally, purification of knowledge and vision, Jnana Dasana Visuddhi. And the analogy given is in the sutta is with relay coaches, which is a way in ancient times a message could be passed very quickly from one center to another, and was used by kings and also diplomats, merchants, and so on. If they wanted to send a message quickly, relay coaches stations would be established along the route, and you could drive the horses very quickly and just change horses at each station and keep going without exhausting your horses. And the point made in the sutta is that each of these purifications is not the goal of the path. The goal of the path is given at the end as being a realization of nibbana. And each of these stages is for the purpose of reaching the next stage. So purification of sila, of ethics, is for the purpose of purification of mind, and so on. So one leads to another, one sets the basis for the next. So this bare bones kind of a teaching became very important in later times. Each of these stages was considerably elaborated in the commentaries. And we have the great work by Buddhaghosa, which came about 1,000 years after the Buddha. Buddhaghosa being the great commentator who worked in Sri Lanka, although he was of North Indian birth. His magnum opus is the very important text, the Visuddhimagga, the Path of Purification. And that book is quite a lengthy work. In English translation, it runs to something like 800 pages. And it has a very high reputation in Theravada countries. It's meant to be a comprehensive outline of all the teachings. And the whole work, from the beginning to the end, is structured around these 7 purifications. Each section of the book is meant as an elaboration of one of these stages, and in the course of that, the entire Buddhist teaching is intended to be expounded. So it served as the scaffolding for that great work. Then we have the next stage I want in the development of this set of teachings that I want to discuss is the work of Mahasi Sayadaw. Mahasi Sayadaw is a very important Burmese a bhikkhu who lives from 1984 to 1904, from 1904 to 1982, and became very well known. He's known under the name Mahasi Sayadaw. This is the Burmese naming convention for senior monks. Is that the word Sayadaw is a title, an honorific. Like in Thai tradition, I have the honorific Ajahn, so Ajahn Punadamo. In Burma, it would be Sayadaw. And the name Mahasi is not a personal name. It refers to the township in which his monastery was established. So it means he was the Mahasi Sayadaw, or the Sayadaw of Mahasi Township. But that's the name he's known by. And now, when he was a young monk, he learned this method of meditation from a monk called U Narada, and developed it, formalized it, and became the principal teacher of this method, popularizing it not only in Burma but around the world. Mahasi Sayadaw did some considerable travel outside of Burma in his later years, including into Western countries. And Mahasi centers, or meditation centers that taught his method, have been established in many countries. It's one of the best known meditation methods. Now, some historical background to Burmese Vipassana generally. Although you'll sometimes hear claims that these various methods, like Mahasi method or the Goenka method, originate from the Buddha, this is only true in a very indirect sense. The formal methods really only date back probably to the 18th century, and there was a historical circumstance that allowed them to arise. Burma in the early modern period, the Sangha was organized very tightly, and any monks that were teaching anything other than the really mainstream, narrowly defined teachings that were approved by the High Sangha Council were reprimanded and silenced. So there was no chance of developing new methods of meditation in that system. But then there occurred the wars with the British Empire, and Britain conquered Burma in stages. And there was a long period when Britain held territory in the southwest, adjacent to their holdings in India, and the rest of Burma remained independent. And during that period, the monks who were in the British zone were no longer under the effective control of the Sangha Council in Rangoon, and they could basically do what they want. And they experimented with different meditation methods and so on. And the Vipassana movement began at that time. Of course, the British authorities didn't really pay attention or care what the Buddhist monks were doing. So this was the beginning of the Vipassana movement, which included many different strands, many different kinds of teachings. And we have today, I would say, 3 types of Vipassana meditation that have become popularized outside of Burma in other countries in Asia, like Thailand and Sri Lanka, but also in the West, in Europe and America. And these are the Mahasi method, which I'm going to focus on, and also the Goenka method and the Uba Kin method, which is the most recent to come out of Burma. These are, and there are others, but they're not as well known. So Mahasi, besides being a meditation master, he was also renowned as a scholar. He presided at what's called the 6th Buddhist Council that was held in, I think it was 1954 in Burma, when monks from all the different Theravada countries came together and in consultation produced a newly edited and agreed upon text for the Pali Canon. Mahasi Sayadaw was thought of so highly that he was the chief editor of this work. So he was a master of Pali, and he actually wrote in Pali. That the Progress of Insight was written not in Burmese but in Pali, and of course now it's been translated into many languages. I've pinned a comment in the chat with a link from the Access of Insight .org website, where you can get a HTML version of the Progress of Insight. It's not a really long book, but it's very very concise, and it's very useful meditation kind of manual or work. You know? And if you glance at the table of contents of that work, it's organized around these 7 purifications, but it's expanded to different subsections that are entirely derived from the commentaries, which gives us altogether the numbering in the version Access to Insight goes from 1 to 19, but they don't number the first 2 Visuddhis. So really there's 21 stages of insight. You may have heard this term, stages of insight, which is based on an expansion from the 7 purifications. An important general comment I'd like to make at the outset is about Vipassana. I always like to say, when I'm giving teachings and talking about Vipassana meditation, I think this point is important. I like to make this initially, that it's incorrect really to say that Vipassana is a meditation. I think Vipassana is more usefully thought of as a state of mind, or a way of approaching the contents of mind. And the various meditations are methods for accessing that state of mind. So there's no one Vipassana method that is singular. There are skillful means that have been developed by very wise meditation masters that will allow a person to access this state of mind of Vipassana, which Vipassana really means clear seeing. Insight is how it's usually translated. That's not bad. A literal translation would be clear seeing. So the idea of Vipassana is that one is fully conscious of the objects of consciousness as they arise. In each moment of existence, whether we're meditating or not, what is happening is that there's an object of consciousness, a Dhamma, and there's the mind, the Chitta, arising to that object. And this is a continual process. And there follows from this taking of an object, in the normal course of events, there follows from the taking of an object, there follows Vedana, or feeling. You would feel it to be pleasant. There follows desire, craving. This is a dependent origination. Now, what we're trying to do with Vipassana is to make the process entirely conscious, so that we're completely awake and aware of each object that passes through the screen of consciousness. And the training, as we progress in the path, the training is to be less and less reactive to the objects. So each object is seen just in its own nature, just as it is, without desire or fear. This is just an object of consciousness I'm aware of. So a good general rule of thumb to be held in mind when trying to develop this state is to treat each object with the same degree of attention. No object is so trivial it may be ignored, and no object is so important that it needs to be held onto or examined. Each object is just seen and allowed to pass. And this is not an easy training, because the natural tendency of the mind is to react to the objects, get lost in either fear or fascination, and get spun out and go down various rabbit holes of the mind. So one of the ways in that it's spoken of, one of the ways this attitude of mind is spoken of, is to develop a highly precise and clear form of equanimity that's called a tatramajatata, being in the middle about that, or specific neutrality. Specific neutrality is the translation Bhikkhu Bodhi uses, and it's a very good one. It expresses the meaning. But a literal breakdown of the root would give us being in the middle about that. And that is tatra, which implies a very sharp, precise that. So the mind that has vipassana is in the middle, meaning it's not swayed to one direction or the other, and it's very precise. That precision is a very important aspect of developing vipassana. So it's not a vague, general, fuzzy awareness. It's a very precise, momentary, sharp, clear knowing of what is happening in the mind at this moment. So having described to some degree the state of mind that we're seeking, I'll now describe the Mahasi method of doing that in brief. Well, this is the method popularized by Mahasi Sayadaw. It is sometimes called, you'll see it in English discourse, sometimes referred to as the noting method, because this was the particular spin that Mahasi put on it. The particularity of his technique is the emphasis on that precision, that one sees the object clearly. And this is done by noting the object. So at each moment, an object is being presented to consciousness, and the meditator is training him or herself to take the object clearly in the moment and not be vague about it by giving it a label. And this is the noting. So a very quick, brief, subliminal note is applied to the object. So objects can be internal or external. So we have, remembering, daydreaming, hearing, smelling, moving. Whatever the object of consciousness is, then one gives this brief label. This is the core of the Mahasi method. It is possible to get tied up with that if it's not done skillfully. Remember that the principle of the noting is kind of like a trick you're playing on yourself to make sure you've actually seen the object. So it's counterproductive to be hung up on choosing a label or wondering if that's the correct label. You just make sure you've actually seen it and put a label on it and carry on. So there's no real correct label or note for any particular object. That said, some types of noting are better than others for this purpose. Generally, you should try and keep the notes very brief, like a word or two. You might have generally one word is sufficient, but you might distinguish between, say, uh, feeling pain, feeling heat, feeling pleasure, like that. And generally try to use verbs rather than nouns. So you're not solidifying or reifying the objects. You're seeing them as ongoing process. As you get skillful with this, more familiar with it, you can begin to use the objects, or use the labels to try and break down um, persistent habits of mind, um, like distinguishing between different types of thought. Certainly, I think distinguishing between thoughts of past and uh, thoughts of future, thoughts of imagination are all useful. So, remembering, speculating, hoping, uh, daydreaming, these are more precise and more useful than just calling them all thinking. So that's the core principle of his method. Um, the way it's practiced is to begin the sit by placing the attention on the abdomen, and watching the rising and falling of the abdomen. And this is also a characteristic of the Mahasi method. It's well known. The idea is that you're taking a broad object, so it's not a focus uh, precise enough for the mind to enter jhana, which you want to avoid in doing Vipassana meditation. You don't want to become unified in the mind. You want to be aware of constantly of different objects. So you rest on the movement at the belly, and some degree of samadhi is developed, but not sufficient to enter jhana. And at that point, you're not doing the noting. You're just being aware of the sensation of breathing. And you hold that practice for anywhere from a few breaths to a few minutes until the mind feels settled. You feel some calm. Then you open the gates, so to speak, and start paying attention to other objects and naming them or noting them. And the normal course of events, you'll without citing or choosing, you'll naturally cycle back and forth between periods of time spent on peacefully watching the movement at the belly and periods of time when you're noting objects. Because the advice is, when you're noting objects, if there's a period when it's difficult to notice objects, and you're kind of left in a blank space, you shouldn't be fishing around or creating objects. You go back and rest on the belly until objects begin to present themselves again. Then you go out and notice them, and you'll naturally cycle back and forth between periods of time when the mind is fairly busy and objects are passing through the mind, and periods of time when you're just resting on the movement of the breath in the abdomen. So that's the general instruction for sitting meditation, and that's alternated with walking meditation. And the walking is done in the Mahasi method. The walking is done very, very slowly. And one is aware of the sensation on the soles of the feet. This replaces the breath at the abdomen as the basic object during walking. So you're aware, and mostly you're breaking it up into 3 stages. You're aware of lifting, moving, placing, and you walk at a very slow pace. And again, if the mind gets busy, you stop walking, you stand still, notice the objects, and then you carry on walking again when the mind gets a bit more quiet. and you go back and sit again. In traditional Mahasi meditation centers, if one is doing a retreat, there's a very strict schedule, and it can involve alternate periods of walking and sitting for as much as 20 hours a day. And there's a practice for when, of course, there's periods in the day when you need to, eat or go to the toilet and, or take care of a few basic things like that. But the practice is not ended when that's going on. There's no break. You practice being aware of the movements of the body and the sensations and the feelings and so on involved in those activities. And you try to do everything very slowly. So you're aware of every motion, every sensation. Now, this is not an easy practice. It can be very difficult. And generally, it becomes somewhat easier if you begin with some tranquility work, some samatha meditation, before you undertake an extended period of vipassana. That sort of eases the process. But in the traditional Mahasi method, there's no real samadhi work. It's sometimes called a bare insight path or method. So that's a brief description of the Mahasi method. I think I've covered the main points. I'm going to give a skeletal introduction. Some of you may have done this practice, and if you haven't, there are plenty of resources on the internet for finding out more detailed instructions on the Mahasi school, Mahasi method. And pretty well covered what I wanted to in this lecture. I'm just going to finish by looking ahead a little bit to what's coming in the next several lectures. I'm going to structure this around that work, Progress of Insight, which is of numerous books that Mahasi Sayadaw wrote. This one is probably the most well-known, probably the best sort of overall summary of his approach to meditation. He wrote extensively, actually. There's a series of books he wrote as commentaries on particular suttas. They're very hard to find, those books, but I don't think they've been distributed very widely, but they're quite interesting. So I think that's all I want to say for this week, and we'll dive into the heart of the matter next week, and we'll see if there's any. I'll stay on now, and hopefully the internet is kinder to us this week than it has been lately, and I'll see if there's anything in the questions that I can deal with. So if you have questions, type them into the chat. Has a biography of Mahasi Sayadaw been published? I think there has. It's not coming to mind right now. I think I remember seeing a biography of him. But you can just do an internet search for that. What type of meditation do I teach, and how can one learn it? Well, I teach different things. Mostly I focus on insight meditation based on Mahasi and Anapanasati. Do devas have electronics in their realm? I kind of think that's unlikely, but who knows? I don't see why they would really want it or need it. Does the Mahasi method fall within the steps of Sila Samadhi Panya? Yes, it very definitely does, and we'll see that when we go through the seven Visuddhis, because the first two are Sila and Samadhi, and then the other five are Panya. While it is clearly better to have a teacher, is it possible to practice method effectively based on talks like this and reading? Yes, it is. I think the advantage of having a teacher is that it can save you from wasting time somewhat, because a teacher can point out to you if you're a bit off in your practice. But if you don't have a teacher, but you've been studying and you've been listening to talks or reading books, um, you can still practice fruitfully. It just may take you longer because you may waste some time and going down blind alleys until you figure out, oh, this isn't working, and you adjust your practice on your own. But yeah, I don't think you absolutely need to have a teacher. What do you think of the Pa'ak method? It seems a lot more detailed and complete than the other traditions in the Theravada school. Um, to be honest, I have not myself gone into the Pa'ak method very deeply. Um, I have read some of his works, and I've spoken to people who've done Pa'ak retreats. I think it sounds like a very comprehensive and a good method. Um, like I said in the initial comments, I don't think there's one technique of Vipassana that's universally superior and correct. And they're all different approaches towards the same goal. Um, from what I have seen from reading Pa'ak, this will also bear on the previous question. I think that's one method where you really would benefit from having a teacher, because from the reading I did of Pa'ak's method, it's very detailed and complex, actually, stage by stage kind of practice. And at least I didn't find the written description sufficient to really understand at some points. I would have really liked to have an expert to talk to clarify some of the points. Do you think it is better to include jhana meditation to Mahasi method? Now, I think, well, I would phrase it this way. I don't think I would include it. That's sort of counterproductive. But to have done jhana meditation prior to doing Mahasi method as a kind of a preliminary practice, I think that it would make it much easier. I think that's a very useful approach. Should one be concerned about comparing and contrasting various meditation methods to choose the best? I have learned the Goenka method, but have very little knowledge of others. I don't think you really need to decide which is best. Like you put the best there in quotes, and that's good. There may be a method that's best for you. That different individuals have different temperaments, and some methods may work better for one individual than another. I think you can benefit from experimenting a bit, trying out, but really you'll make more progress if you decide on one method and stick with it, other than switching back and forth all the time. Is there any talk from you what to do, how to take care of myself or others while passing through the process of death? No, I don't think I've done that. You could find a lot from other people. Could you summarize the difference between Mahasi and Goenka method? Um, well, the Goenka method, as I understand it, is uh, is quite different in the technique, and it's based on scanning the body and paying attention to sensations in the body. So it's a bit more, I would say, directed than the Mahasi method, because you're kind of choosing a class of objects to look at, whereas one of the essence of the Mahasi method is you don't manipulate the stream of objects. You step back from it and watch it, and you're not favoring your attention to physical sensations over mental states and so on, but paying attention to everything with the same degree. Sometimes I feel tired from daily life, and jhana meditation seems more restorative to the mind than attempting to practice insight. Should I just push through the tiredness and keep noting phenomena? No, I think you're generally better to stick with the jhana meditation. The advice I give people, if they sometimes people ask me about what they should do for a daily practice, and I I think it depends a lot on your life situation. But if you are in a situation in your life where you're quite busy, or if it's stressful and you have limited time to meditate, I think you get a lot more benefit from doing samadhi work, um, because the insight meditation can take some time to really show any results. And what you really need in a busy life, what you would do you the most benefit, is some space and peace of mind. So don't try and force doing the vipassana. Save that for when you've got more time and space, when you can devote several hours at least to the practice. Then it's worthwhile to do some vipassana. Can you expand on one's temperament and selection of the meditation method? I get very angry very quickly, and I found metta to be quite beneficial. Should I practice just metta? Um, yeah, well, you're wise to take a metta if you have a problem with anger. That's the recommended antidote. Um, but I would generally say not to limit yourself to one of these secondary meditations only. Uh, you should know that metta meditation, well, has many benefits. It won't by itself take you to enlightenment. Um, uh, in terms of other temperaments, um, the greedy or sensual person should is recommended to do meditations on the body. Um, and those are the two kind of polar opposites: the angry type and the sensual type. There's also the deluded type, who needs to develop more clarity of mind, so they need to do more study and clarify their thinking. But as for like different methods of vipassana, I think you can only really decide by trying. See if this, if you try to do one of these methods of vipassana and you just don't seem to make any headway, it seems too difficult. It may be that's not the method for you. Is enlightenment possible in one lifetime? Uh, yes and no. There's always the last lifetime. You don't know what you've done in previous lifetimes. You might have done an incredible amount of work in previous lifetimes, and you don't need much effort in this life. Um, so that's really an unanswerable question. Okay, you're very welcome. Okay, so we're kind of winding down. It looks like. Would it be Generally speaking, would it be more accurate to say that one should spend more time on practice than study? Yes, I think so. Um, One of my teachers used to say that there were two periods of when study is most useful, or should be the primary uh, you know attention. More attention should be paid to study. One is at the very beginning when you're just starting out to give you a basis, and uh, later on when if you have had some results and you take up teaching, then you need to uh, open the books to so you have a vocabulary and a structure to formulate the teachings around. It's not just all kind of vague extempore stuff. Okay, so I'll stop there for now. I think that was sufficient for today for laying the groundwork, and we'll begin next week working through the text. And uh, I have put up a pinned comment with a link for an electronic version of Mahasi's Progress of Insight. Anyone who wants to follow along, that would be a very useful text to download and have a look at. And we'll just go through it bit by bit, as I don't know how many weeks it will take to go through the whole thing. We'll see. Okay.